Chris Sikora, and I'm going to step you through exercise 1 of Creo Parametric 7.0. Now, Creo is also known as ProEngineer. ProEngineer has been around for quite some time, since 1987. I've been using it since approximately 1995, so I have some experience with this system overall. But we're going to step through, and this is basically also going to explain to you how we typically work as far as exercises go and the labs that you end up doing. So let's begin. First of all, let's take a look at our goals for E1, and that's how basically when you save a part, save it as, if it's exercise 1, save it as E1, use a capital E1, and you could actually save it as a PDF and send it to me. Also, we have labs too, and I'm going to go through that in just a second. But that's our goal at the bottom right there. You can actually see that model. Now it's like a plastic enclosure. It's actually hollowed out. You can't really see it from the angle that that's at, but you can also see it's in the interface of Creo. And this is what they call a photorealistic rendering. So it's it actually has some enhancement digitally to it. All right, first of all, we're going to talk about the interface once we get into Creo. And the interface, again, that's like what you see here. This is the model tree, and then this is the ribbon up at the top, and how this, things like that. Then we're going to talk about settings. Now, settings, there's actually a couple areas in Creo where you can actually set things up, like what color do you want items to be? What units do you want? Do you want metric? Do you want English, or imperial, as it's sometimes known as? Then we're going to take a look at sketching. So the way you start modeling a part is you actually draw a two-dimensional profile of it, like you see here. And you can see it's a rectangle, and then you put in the dimensions. Like there you can see the width, and then you can see the height. And we'll even talk about this. Notice that little parentheses and week. Remember that, because we're going to talk about what that is and what that does. But we will sketch this in two-dimensional space, and then we go ahead and we get into 3D modeling from that part, or that profile. We can extrude it out and actually see there it's making a 3D model. You see the little pink arrow there in the middle, and then we can specify right there. You see it's set to 0.5, so that would be a ½ inch. So that's the goal for that. Now we're going to have a little fun with this. Typically in the training guide, and I'll show you where that's all at in just a moment. Those of you in D2L have access to it. Those of you who might not have access to D2L at the present time, or perhaps you just need to, I'll actually show you where you could get it on the web as well. So we'll do some fun stuff. We're going to do that photorealistic rendering where we actually make it look really sharp. Okay, and I hope you find that interesting. And then there's 2 labs. Now with every exercise, there's labs that go with it. Sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 1. And usually it's how long is it going to take you. So if they're easy ones, I'll usually give you 2. If it's a very difficult lab, I give you 1, and those you typically want to do on your own. Now be aware that this first exercise, I actually show you how to do it, but I recommend when you do the labs, those are what you're supposed to be doing on your own. You're going to be a much better designer using the software if you do those on your own and try them. And then you could go back and watch the video. You can actually pause the video once we're done with exercise 1, model these 2 things up, they're in the training guide, and then see how I did it. And you're going to learn so much. You're going to be before you know it, you'll be exceptional at this software. And that's the goal. All right, and so these are what the labs look like. This is lab 1 and lab 1B. So when it comes to the nomenclature, we're talking about like exercise 1 is going to be always known as E1. And then the labs that coincide with whatever exercise it is, exercises are kind of like the chapter, you might say, will carry the, like, instead of E1, it'll be L1 for lab 1. Or L1B for lab 1B. And so when we get to exercise 2, you'll have lab 2, and exercise 3 will have lab 3 as well. And I don't give you videos for all of the labs, be aware, because that's what you're supposed to be practicing on your own. And so that's going to make you a better designer. And ultimately, this is what our goal today is to finish these 3 models. And so every week, if you're in a 16-week course of this, you're going to have to model these up. And again, I give you the videos typically, especially if we're doing it online. Those of you who are in my class will actually do the exercise together, and the labs, you need to do those on your own. Okay, so let's begin. I'm going to go ahead and I started up Creo earlier. So those of you know there's a little video, and especially in D2L, you could download the software. You just, even if you're not in my class, if you're just watching this on YouTube, you could just go Google Creo Student. And it depends on where you're going to school. Sometimes they have a licensing agreement. I don't know exactly what that's all about as far as what school you might go to, if you're going to be able to download it or not. But where I teach at, all my students, you have access to it. Just make sure you use your student email address if you haven't done that already when you register and you have to make a password. Okay, so here we can see the interface, and that was the first thing we said we wanted to talk about. Now this is what we call the ribbon up at the top here, and the ribbon is a generic name. As you know, those of you who might have taken a Microsoft Office class, they always call that the ribbon, the icons up at the top. Now on the left-hand side here, you have the model tree and folder browser and favorites. What we really focus on in this class is primarily the model tree, and that's going to contain a roadmap of everything you do when you model something up. And we'll see that in action. Now, also, as far as the options go, if you wanted to change some of the options, you go to File and go to Options. All right, and here is where you could set up your environment. So if you go to Environment, for example, there's a lot of settings. We're not going to go through all these because I could spend a whole day going through all of them. Over the course of this class, the course I should say, we're going to go through and we're going to see a lot of these in action and see what they do versus trying to explain them initially. But for a few of you, like system appearance, some of you might see there's an interface and there's a default and there's light and dark. These are wonderful, easy settings. Those of you who come over from maybe a different CAD system where the screen background was a darker color, click on dark and it's going to set everything up very easily for you. I'd recommend new users do it this way. Or there's light. And I just go with default. So be aware, if you do decide to change it, I would actually recommend changing it another time, not your first class with me, because what it does, it changes all the colors. So sometimes I'll say, okay, click on the orange dot. But if you change it to dark, it might actually appear green. So that's why I'm just giving you a little warning. I would stick with default today, but if you want later on, tinker with those. You could change individual colors too. All right, as we go to model display here, you'll see that there's quality and shading quality. So like mine set to 6. If you set it really high, just be aware if your graphics card can't support it, you might have some issues. It might actually crash, and I've had that happen if you don't have an adequate graphics card. So just be aware. If it ever does crash, a lot of times it'll say it's like an OpenGL issue or whatever. Just go back in here and change the settings back to like a lower setting. There also is the ability to export our configurations and just reset it that way too. But let's move along here. I'm going to leave this, the default model orientation, make sure it's isometric. That's my favorite. All right, entity display, you'll see there's anti-aliasing. I have mine set to 16x. I have a professional graphics card in here. Professional graphics cards are the NVIDIA Quadro and the Radeon Pro. If you don't have those cards, be careful setting the anti-aliasing. This smooths out the lines, makes it look really nice, but it can be a strain on a weaker computer. So I actually have a professional workstation laptop. So just be aware of that. So you might not get the same quality if you set these. And then text anti-aliasing, I have mine on, but you might want to leave it as is on your computer because not everyone buys a workstation. Okay, they're usually just for industry. All right, and they're typically not very good for gaming. Just be aware, those of you who like to play video games, if you buy a workstation, the graphics cards they're good and they're very expensive, they're high end, but they might not be as fast, believe it or not, as a gaming card. They're just tailored differently. Okay, so entity display, let's scroll down here. Let's see, I think we're pretty good with that actually. Let's go to Sketcher. Now here on Sketcher, the one that I just want to make sure you have turned on is make the sketching plane parallel to the screen. Make sure that's on for this class in particular. That's one of my favorite settings because it automatically orients that sketch normal to the surface of your monitor. And so it's very easy to interpret what you're dimensioning and such. So I would recommend turning that on. And there are you can set up keyboard shortcuts and all sorts of fun things here. But that's about it. I don't want to go into too much depth today on this, but like I said, we'll cover more later. Now, when you hit OK, if you made any changes and you hit OK, it's going to prompt you. I didn't get it because I didn't make any changes. I already had mine set up, but it'll prompt you to save the configuration file. Go ahead and save it, and you should be in good shape. And then it will remember those settings every time. Okay, so we're going to go right into building that model. So we've covered settings, we've covered the interface a little bit. The interface we cover a little bit more, or actually a lot more as we go through today, so just be aware of that. So we're not quite done with that checklist that we saw for goals earlier. All right, but we're going to go into new, and again, this is part of the interface. When you go into new, there's all these different options. Note for this introductory class, the only things we're ever going to select, at least for the first 4 weeks, are just parts. That's all we're going to model. First 4 weeks, that's our goal. The 5th week, we'll get into what's called assemblies, which is multiple parts inside a completely different, it's an assembly file that looks a heck of a lot like a part file. So it allows you to put multiple parts in it. Okay, and then we're going to also cover drawings on the 6th week, and that whole week will be devoted to just making two-dimensional layouts of our parts. So if you want to skip ahead, those of you who are like, hey, I want to see how drawings made right away, watch exercise 6, the video, and you can see how that's done. But as far as manufacturing and format, notebook, don't worry about those. We're not going to cover those. Those are advanced topics. All right, first of all, for your file name, go ahead and capital E1. Now, one thing to note with Creo is typically don't put a space in between things. Like if you're going to say E1B or something, don't put a gap. Or if you're going to put a gap, put a little underscore in there. Okay. All right. Now there's a common name. We don't need to worry about that. Just E1 and hit OK. Now what it does, see this working directory? I always just like to go with this default working directory. But when you work in a company, they might actually have you, they'll force you, or they'll set up their IT department that you work in a specific directory, like on a server. Whereas the default directory, I just leave it as is on my computer because it's just fine the way it is, rather than setting it up. But when you do save it, I'll show you where to save it in a better place, and you save a copy, and you can use it later. But now we can see we have these, what they're called planes. And look at over here in the model tree, you have right, top, and front. And as you click on them, they highlight in green. And those are your paper that you're going to sketch on. So when we're drawing that sketch of that rectangle, we select one of those views and we do it. And we have to just figure out, though, is that the front view we're drawing, the right view, or the top. But as we go further into modeling over the course of the next few weeks, we'll focus more on that. But right now, I need you to focus just on sketching, and then later on you can give more thought, and we'll just have discussions about, like, should I draw this on the right, top, or front? I'll be honest, it really doesn't matter that much for the parts we're doing right now. And in the industry, even if you have awareness, once you start using this and you have spatial awareness, it kind of starts to make sense. But the first day, it's a little much to talk about. So we're just going to go ahead and note for the next 4 weeks, we're going to sketch always on the front plane when we start off. Okay, so what you do, you click on that front plane. Now notice right below it, there is a CSY. That's a coordinate system. That's the actual world coordinate. That's the 0, 0, 0 for X, Y, and Z. Now, do you have to really know and understand X, Y, and Z? No, that's the beauty about this software. It's a granddaddy of softwares when it comes to computer-aided design. And most of the companies have mimicked this technique. Creo was like the grandfather of this. And X, Y, and Z Cartesian coordinate modeling, which was the early 80s, very much more difficult than what we're doing here. This whole concept of using planes to sketch on and then extruding is, in my opinion, it's very easy. It's understandable. So anyhow, all three of those planes intersect each other at that origin. Okay, so let's click on the front. And now you'll get this quick launch, which I love the quick launch. Okay, but note these quick launch icons are up here as well. They're the same exact icons. So if you move your pointer away, it evaporates. And then you can just use these. Now there's sketch and extrude. We're going to start off using a method which I think is probably easiest for most people to understand. And that's starting a sketch on the plane versus going to a feature initially. As you get better at it though, picking a feature first might be a more plausible option, even more efficient option. And we'll have a discussion about that later, not today. But let's go with Sketch. Now, once we select Sketch, you'll see your plane orients itself automatically. And that was that checkbox I said. It was one of my favorite checkboxes where it automatically orients the plane parallel to your screen. So we're sketching here, and these are the planes. Now, those aren't boundaries, by the way. It's infinite. However big you make this, you can make it that way. So what we're going to do is go to the rectangle tool. Find rectangle up here and click. Now move your pointer over the origin, which is see XYZ there. You'll get a little blue dot. When you get that blue dot, click. Now drag to the upper right. Now try and stay away. Look at this. If I don't click yet, just if I get that little equal symbol, stay away from those. They're great sometimes, and in this case, if it's not going to be equally square, it's not good for us. I mean, they're easy. You could just click on them and delete them if you accidentally get them. But they're automatic relations that are established, and we just want to avoid that. So click to the upper right, make a small little box like that. Now here's the thing with Creo. When it comes to your mouse buttons, the left mouse button is what we're going to use 90% of the time. That's what I'm using to sketch with, and I'll always just refer to it as click because that's what we use all the time. All right, so that's the left. So when I made that, I just click and click, so left mouse button. I'll very rarely say left mouse button after today's class, by the way. But the right mouse button allows you to select, menus will pop up. Now, when you right click with Creo, it's interesting. It's a little different than some Windows programs where you automatically get the pull-down menu that appears. Creo sometimes, it's not like instantaneous. You have to hold it down for about a second, a little over a second. So just be aware, it takes a minute if you ever do that. But I'm going to hit escape, and escape gets me out of that tool. Now, if you really want the dimensions to appear once you've drawn something, believe it or not, that middle wheel, that will zoom in and out. Okay, if you scroll, and that's easy, but when I said believe it or not, it's actually a button too. Not everyone knows that. If you push it down and hold it like it's a button, it'll do certain things. And what it does in Creo, it actually kind of acts as an escape key sometimes. So go ahead and watch this on that mouse button. Click, and look at what it just did. It actually, now here, you could go up here to the zoom to fit refit, and it'll zoom up for us. Okay, and now we could actually see, if you middle click again, you can actually grab these dimensions and drag them out. Now, we have a rectangle, but as you can see, it's very large. The actual dimensions that we want are actually located in the book. And those of you who are taking my class, there's a video before this that shows you how to utilize this. If you missed it, now is the time to watch and pay attention. So I'm going to middle click on Chrome here. And I want you to type in VER, T as in Tom, A, N as in Nancy, UX1. Now, if you have D2L, you could get all this from D2L. You don't need to do this. But if you're not on D2L, go to this web page for Vertanian. I made this page for my students as an alternative to D2L so they can access things. And also, BRACEA, as you can see here, the BRACEA initiative is broad reach educational content for CAD. So it's for anyone to use. And I have people from almost every country in the world using this page. And what you have your instructional manuals, part files, videos, even your exams. Okay. So for example, if you go to instructional manuals here and you're in the Creo parametric, now it says 6.0. That's because I haven't updated the manual yet. There's not a huge amount of changes that I need to make, but I will get it up there eventually. You'll see Creo parametric 7.0 soon, but 7.0 just came out literally like a week ago, so I haven't had a chance to update my training guide. But if you click on that, you can see the training guide for the course. And it's in PDF, and here it is. You can see this is 6.0. And it actually gives you, like those of you in my CAD 105 class, this is a sample resume. It's not the full syllabus. And the syllabus is basically mirrors what we have in our class. But be aware, the syllabus that's on D2L is the solid one that you want to use. This doesn't have the dates and things like I have on D2L. But here you can see the weekly topics and what we're planning, what the required hardware and the software. There's actually a link now since 7.0 just came out that if you go there, you'll actually see 7.0 you can download. All right, but this has everything you need, and even the points totals for, look at that, there's E1, L1, L1B. So E1 today is worth 10 points. L1, 5 points. L1B is 10 points, and so on and so forth. So you could understand immediately where you are, what you need. And again, the grade book on D2L has those all on there. So you could always check your grades once you send me those exercises in the labs. And remember, always send them to me as PDF. Okay, so here we have the interface. We're just discussing this. So really, this is just a rehash of what I'm going over. So we talked about the interface. Look at that, the origin, the model tree, viewport, the mouse buttons, which we just discussed. There it is. Now the options menus, talks about that too. A little bit out of order I went, but that's okay. This is all here. It tells you how to start a sketch and talks a little bit about more details, some other things that we're going to talk about as we go through. But you finally get to exercise 1, and here it is. And this is where you can see the actual parameters that you have to use. So if I zoom up here, you can see we're going to go ahead, and we've just gone through this whole series of steps, but 5 by 3 is what we're going to go ahead and do it. Now we're not going to use, I'm not going to use the train guide to it because I have it in memory. I wrote this guide, so I don't need to use it all the time, but this will help you. If you get, some of you like to have it, print it out. It's free to print out, free for anyone to print out. Okay, so let's go back here. So that's where I'm getting those dimensions and those parameters from, or you could just watch this video, of course. So double click on this dimension down here. Now there's 2 forms of constraints inside Creo. One is dimensional constraints. So like we want this to be 3 inches wide. Now notice that when I double click, there's up to 12 decimal places to deal with there. Now, if you want to look professional, don't backspace on it or, type in 3.0000 whatever. Just type 3 and hit enter. Because it was 3.0, it will know to fill in the zeros. And you can see right there. Now, it shrunk down a little bit. Now let's get this one. Double click on this dimension. Type in 5. Hit enter. And now you could hit refit right up here. Now, next week I'm going to show you how to make a fast key for refit, like where you could just hit R and it will automatically do that. But I don't want to go into that. That's a little bit more detailed today than I want to go into. But just note, reason to watch exercise 2 because I'll go through that with you. All right, I'm going to squeeze these in a little bit. I could hit refit again. So now we have these dimensions, and I'll tell you what, we can actually hide those planes. You don't want to delete them, but click on the planes here, or this button right up here, and turn off select all. And it's going to clean up the screen a little bit. And one reason I want to clean it up is so I can discuss these little things. So this is the second layer of constraints that you have. Constraints can be automatically added or manually added. Like when we drew that out, that rectangle tool automatically added horizontal, vertical, horizontal, and vertical. And coincident, it locked into the origin. That's our anchor point. It's always good, my recommendation is always good to lock in your geometry into the origin. That's another reason why that 0, 0, 0 marker in space is there. It's an anchor point. If you just float it out, it still works. You can still do it, but just be aware that that can be a little confusing. All right, now if you didn't want this like horizontal constraint, you just click on it and you hit delete on your keyboard. Now, notice it puts a dimension, and watch what I could do from here. I could drag that down. So it removed the horizontal constraint. So be aware if you add those, you could remove them. Now you could re-add them, or you could hit undo. So there's an undo button up here. Now just remember, I have students panic and they hit undo like several times. And there is a redo button right next to it, but sometimes I've seen where they've gone too far and it doesn't redo enough. And they remove everything and have to start from scratch, which quite honestly, if you ever feel you have to start from scratch, it's not a bad thing. It's a learning experience. You'll learn a heck of a lot more starting from scratch than actually just doing one at a time. But anyhow, so there is undo, and you can see Control Z is a fast key for that. Now, I want to show you how to add it manually though. So look up here, we have all these options for constraints. Let's go to horizontal. Select that line, boom, and add it. Notice that dimension disappeared too. Weak dimensions disappear. Strong dimensions, like when we double clicked on this one, let me middle click 2 times to get out of that. Now, as I hover over this, you can see in parentheses it says strong. So whenever you change a dimension, it strengthens it. And so it won't automatically be deleted if you add another constraint. In fact, there's going to be a conflict because those are both strong entities. And we'll discuss that another time. But now that we have this, let's go ahead and hit OK. Now, before you 3D model it, you have to hit OK. Now we could go to extrude. Now, you might not see as though, like, okay, it just shaded it. But now here's where I'm going to teach you how to rotate. That wheel does a lot of different things. And you could see in the training guide, it had a whole list of things it does. And you could go back and read that if you like. But if you push it down and actually, let's first scroll it. Scroll in and out. Oh, there we go. And it's zoom. All right. Notice when you're using that zoom, you could scroll in and out on certain areas. Like get your pointer in this upper left corner and use the scroll to zoom up to that region by keeping your pointer focused on that area. Now go ahead and hit refit again. Now, to rotate, hold that middle wheel down like it's a button. Push it. Now hold, don't let it go. Move your mouse left, right, up and down. That's dynamic rotation. Play with it for a while. If you want, go ahead and pause the video and actually give that a try because it's so important to be able to articulate or rotate and look at the models that you're working on. So if you want, give it about a couple minutes. I usually in the class I say, hey guys, tinker with it a little bit. Okay, so anyhow, you can see that. Now here is our extrusion. So we have the ability to grab that little point there and drag it back. Now this little arrow, go ahead and click on it. It flips it backwards or forward. Okay, we want it forward towards us, so just leave it like that. And we actually want to double click in here and type in a value. You can type in 0.5. Now notice I'm not using the ribbon up here. Why not? Well, I just didn't feel like it. You could over here go, make sure it's always solid. Not until the advanced class will we ever do a surface. If you ever get a surface, that's an indicator that you have a sloppy sketch. You might have a line, like a gap between the lines or something. And so it can't create a water-type boundary condition, so it could extrude it. So just be aware of that. But anyhow, you can see right here I could have typed in 0.5 as well. And it does it. Now here's the flip switch. Just like that pink one, we'll flip it to forward or backwards. Okay. Notice that you have a remove material. It's grayed out. That's what they call the object action paradigm. And it grays out things that you're not capable of doing. The reason why is because to remove material, you'd have to have a solid volume to remove from, which we don't have because it's our first feature. All right, let's go ahead and make sure it's 0.5. Hit enter and hit the green check. You could hit refit, but also take a look over here. You have display style. Hit that little arrow. You have shaded with reflections. Now, if you don't get this, it might be because you don't have a professional graphics card, so don't feel bad if you don't have that. Go to shading with edges. Click off of it, and you can see the edges there. You could go to shading, no hidden lines. So it's like a wireframe type of deal. Okay, that and all these are going to benefit you sometime or another. But let's go back with shading with edges. That's my favorite. All right, now there's also this one right here, saved orientations. Hit that. You'll see you could go to front, back, top. Go to standard, and remember we set our standard up as isometric in the options menu. There were other options in there, by the way. There was trimetric, I think there's even dimetric, and you can make customized ones too. All right, there's also perspective, and this gives you a vanishing point. We're going to use that later when we want to make a photorealistic rendering to make it look realistic. Turn that off though. It's difficult to work in that mode a little bit for some people, so I would leave it off. Okay, and there's also refresh screen, which we don't need right now. There's also rendering options like this. Leave those off. And then there's zoom in and zoom out. So if you click on that, you could click and drag a fence around an area. Click again, and it zooms up to that region. Same with that one. So anyhow, you can see that there's a number of dimensions. We're not going to go through them all right now. But there's our first solid model. Make sure you're in isometric. So again, over here, standard orientation will bring you that. Default orientation is the same right now. You could set them differently though if you want. I'm not going to do that right now. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and select this face. Now remember we sketched on the front plane last time. Well, now we're going to build a block at the bottom. another corner rectangle, and we're going to extrude it out a 1/2 inch. And it's only going to be 1.5 inches high off the base edge. And it's going to lock into the left and right edges of the model. So let's do that. Go to Sketch. Now, can we go up here? Absolutely. Select it. Either one is fine. Find rectangle. Now, if you hit the little arrow to the right of rectangle, there's corner rectangle, slanted, center rectangle, parallelogram. Center rectangle, little hint. For the last lab for today, the video, I'll show you how to use that. Okay, we usually don't cover it until like I believe next week, but it's a really nice tool. But we're going to go with corner rectangle. Now move your pointer to the lower left corner and let it snap in there. When you get the blue dot, click and drag this to the right. Now when you hover over the right edge, it highlights green in my case. You can actually see a midpoint there. Don't click on the midpoint. You can hover over it. You'll see it will snap to it. We don't want it to be at the midpoint today. Lab 1B though, you will maybe use that. Okay, but anyhow, when you get on this edge, just click and then middle click. Remember, you middle click the wheel, middle click, and that brings up the dimension. Actually, middle click 2 times and it gets you out of whatever tool. So it's kind of like hitting escape. You can hit escape on your keyboard too, but I really like that middle wheel. It does a lot. All right, so now let's move that dimension over here to the right. And we wanted that to be 1.5. So does anyone remember how to change that dimension once you see it there? If those of you said double click, you got it right. So double click. Okay, and go ahead and type in 1.5 and hit enter. Now we could go to OK, go to extrude, and rotate this so you can see it. And you remember rotate? Which button? The wheel. You hold it down and then you move your mouse left or right. Okay, so we've done that. Or remember, you could also go up here and go to standard orientation. Okay, this I said we were going to make it 0.5. So you could double click in here, type in 0.5, hit enter. You could hit enter again or hit OK, either one. And now it merged the two bodies. Okay, now we're going to learn how to put a hole in it. Now, Creo has a wonderful hole, as I call it, wizard, that has counter borders, countersinks, and things like that. We're going to just learn how to do a hole that we're going to draw in with a profile and cut it through for today. We will use the hole wizard in for exercise 4. Okay, so it won't be for a while. But select this face and go to Sketch. Now go to circle. Now if you hit the little arrow to circle, you'll see there's center and point, concentric, 3 point, and 3 point, 3 tangent. We're just going to use center and point. Now in this upper left quadrant, click and drag out a circle, just like I have. Take careful note what I'm doing. Click, and then now middle click 2 times. Remember the middle wheel? Okay, now you'll see some dimensions. Let's drag them out here and move them into a position where we could easily read them. Now they're all weak dimensions. Okay, now this one should be 0.75. So let's double click on that, 0.75. Now this one, we want that one. Double click on that. That's going to be 1 inch. So it's 1 inch off of the left edge. Now this one, we actually want it 1 inch off the top edge, not off the bottom. So you don't have to follow what they give you. That's a weak dimension. We'll override it with our own dimension. So go ahead and select the dimension tool here. It's our first time using the dimension tool. Now, select the top edge that we want to reference from one time. Select the center point, not the outer edge, the center point. See that little cross in the center here of the circle. Move your pointer over here. Now, this is the funny one because no other CAD system I've ever seen does it this way. Now, remember, Creo is a granddaddy of 3D CAD software. So they do things differently because no one had a way of doing these things back then. They had to be creative and think of ways to do it. Most of you from other CAD systems, if you've used them, would know that you would just click, which IE means in this class left. If you try that right here, because you want to drop it there, nothing happens. And you'll say, wow, that's weird, because almost every CAD system out there does it with the left mouse button. Not Creo. Remember, Creo is the granddaddy. There were no rules when they wrote this. Instead, it's the middle wheel, the middle button. You just have to click once. Now, but hover where you want it, like right here, middle click, and type in 1. Now, those of you who have your dimensions, like I'm going to middle click there, drag this, like, don't lay them out like this, okay? The whole idea of dimensioning is to lay them out so it's easily read by someone else or even yourself. So you want to lay them out. Now, most of you have taken CAD 101 already, or Engineering 101, which teaches you those rules. But some of you might not have. So just be aware. Lay them out so they look nice, like this. See, look at how that. I try not to have anything overlapping, and they're laid out in such a way that someone could read it easily. And that's the goal of a drawing. Okay, let's go ahead and hit OK. All right, now go to extrude. Rotate with your wheel again. Remember the middle wheel, hold it down, and you can see it's extruding. Now, we want to flip that. Hit that little arrow so it flips it in. Now, look at that, the object action paradigm. Now, believe it or not, that's what they used to call it in the 90s. And it was a technology NASA developed. And it's kind of a predecessor to what we now call AI. Does anyone know what AI stands for? Artificial intelligence. Remember how removed material wasn't available before? Now it is, because we have a volume to subtract from. And so it doesn't let you pick things that you can't use. So it's just like having a little robot next to you with your toolbox. And if you're grabbing a hammer to put in a screw, it's not going to give you a hammer because it knows you can't use it, or you shouldn't use a hammer to put a screw in. It's going to give you a screwdriver. And so that's what Creo is doing right here. So it's kind of a form of AI or expert system. All right, so anyhow, remove material automatically selected. If not, sometimes it's not always smart enough. It depends upon how you model. I've seen it where it got confused and it's wrong. So sometimes you do still have to select it. Just be aware of that. It's not always perfect. AI is never perfect. Okay, but let's see. Now, we see here 0.75. We've been learning just how to extrude things a specific depth. Here's the thing. In this case, you know, it's actually a 1/2 inch thick there. But when it comes to design, designs always change. Okay, be aware. Like, you can have tons of revisions on a part. And one day, if this is a bracket, let's say, and they're like, oh, a 1/2 inch isn't thick enough. We were finding that bracket broke, so let's thicken it to 2 inches thick. Now, if you only had it set to 0.5 for the whole depth, but you know it's supposed to be a through hole all the time, this is where we call in what's called design intent. Design intent is how you could interpret or predefine how something's going to react later on to avoid trouble. And now, I don't want you to think too much about this right now. It's going to come to you sooner or later, and I'm going to try and discuss it over the course of this entire course. So, but instead of specifying a 0.5, where if it ever thickens, we have to go back and change the whole depth too, what if we thought of a way that we never have to change the whole depth? Look at this. Click on depth right there to the right. And find through all, which basically extrudes to intersect with all surfaces. See, the image even shows through all. Click on that. That will ensure that no matter what change comes down, that always goes through. So that's a little bit, a taste of what they call design intent that I'm teaching you right there. All right, go ahead and hit OK. Now, there we are. Now let's test that design intent. Double click on this surface and you'll see the dimensions appear. Now, if that doesn't occur, you can also right click, and this gold ball with the pencil will edit the definition of the extrusion as well. But with these dimensions, this will basically take you back. And you can also right click on the feature over here, right click on that and get the gold ball. And look what, if I click on it, it brings us back to where we were so we can make changes. And that was what was so monumental about this software in 1987 when it came out. It had what's called parametrics, the ability to change. There were a lot of CAD systems in those days where you had to remodel things. Creo, which is originally known as Pro Engineer and still referred to as Pro Engineer, had the insight to be able to change. And that's what's so powerful. Now, all CAD systems these days, most CAD systems have this functionality. But Anyhow, so you could go back and you could change that. I'm going to hit cancel there. But let's make our change here. Let's double click on this surface and you'll see right here, there's the 0.5 dimension. That's for the thickness. Double click. Let's, for the kicks, change it to 1. Hit enter. Now click off of it, middle click 2 times, and look, it still goes through. If we had set it to 0.5, thinking, well, it was 0.5, we're not thinking about change later on down the road, we might have an issue there. We'd have to change the hole, which would just be by double clicking on the hole and finding how deep that cuts as well. Nothing pops up here simply because we selected through all. Okay. All right, so now just hit regenerate up here. If you ever have that where it has artifacts left over from a change, just hit regenerate. Regenerate updates everything. It will go through, and anything that needs to be changed that might not have been updated, updates. All right, now to get that back to 1 inch, you could just hit undo. Try it. Oh, didn't do it. Hit undo again. There we go. Don't go back too far. I've had students who've undone their whole part, and you do have redo, but don't count on it every time. All right, so that finishes this exercise. But remember I said fun stuff. This is where I want to show you some neat stuff. Go to round and set this to 0.5. Now click on this edge and you'll see it rounds the edge. Now grab that little yellow dot, drag it down, try and get it to where that ruler says 1.00. It's a little hard. We could change it right here. Just type in 1, hit enter. Go ahead and select this one over here too. Hit enter. And hit the green check. All right, look at that. That's rounding off corners. Don't go crazy and add over here, okay? Not yet. I do encourage you on the labs to have fun with it because that's where you're going to learn so much. Just add stuff to it. Add chamfers, fillets. Let's add a chamfer. See chamfer right here? Chamfer is an angle. Instead of a round, it's actually straight edge. So you can see here we have distance times distance. And if we set it, let's set it to 0.125. So 1/8 of an inch. And I want you to select this edge. You might have to click twice on that edge. And you'll see it as what's called a chamfer. It's just a straight edge versus whatever. And in this case, if it's 90 degrees that you're putting it on and the distances are equal, it'll automatically make that angle at 45 degrees. But what if we wanted a different angle? Hit the little arrow and look at that. Angle times distance. You would actually be able to specify, like I want a 30-degree angle times 0.125 or whatever, and it gives you a variation of that. So there's a lot of neat things with that too. Have fun with that. Go ahead and select this edge. Hit OK. And then click somewhere over here. All right, so we're getting there. Let's rotate this with your wheel to get this backside. Now, take a moment. I want you to learn how to rotate. I said take a moment earlier in this, and you can do that now too. Rotate it so it looks just like mine. Take a minute. Pause my video. Also, if ever the videos are too fast, in YouTube down below here in the lower right, you'll find the settings like where you can set like 1080 or 720 DPI. There's also an increase or slow down of how fast I go through the lesson. If any of you feel I go too fast, you could slow it to like 0.75, or you could set it to 1.5, which is 50% increase in speed. You can even set it up faster if that's the case, and that could help you get through these lessons, especially if they seem a little slow to you. I try and pace it for everyone, but everyone works at different paces. And if you feel that this is really hard for you, it's going to be hard. By the way, this is the toughest CAD software on the planet, in my opinion. If you've looked at Vertanu 1, where I just showed you, there's a whole list of CAD systems. There's like 15 on there. I made videos for all of them. This one is the hardest. You are basically in the special forces of CAD. If you could do this CAD system, you could do any CAD system on the planet because you are working with the toughest one right now. So don't feel bad. And usually if you're wondering like, hey, when am I going to start picking up on this? Usually after midterm. So by the time you finish the midterm and after that, you'll start to feel like, oh, it's not so bad. It's getting easier. Okay, some people take off quicker than others. So just be aware. Take your time. I'm the Bob Ross of CAD. There's no rush on any of this. Just do the best you can. That's all I ask. And if you do all these as best as you can, you're going to do well. Okay, so now that you got that oriented, let's go to shell. All right, so for thickness, shell, let's set it to 0.06. So 60, they call that 60 thousandths in manufacturing. Yeah, I know it doesn't match what you would call it in math class. In manufacturing, they use different nomenclature. So 0.06 is 60 thousandths. If it was 0.03, it'd be 30 thousandths. If it's 0.100, it's 100 thousandths. All right, so that we have that. Let's go ahead and select this face right here. Click on it maybe a second time. And look at that, you can see it shelled out. Now, hold Control down. Whenever you have to, sometimes I forget to tell you this in the videos, but when you're selecting multiple items, you have to hold Control. So hold Control, select the side face. Don't let go of Control, select this face. Now you could release Control. Once you have the item selected, you can do that. All right, let's go ahead and hit the green check. Now we've taken a very basic part and we've made it extraordinary. Look, imagine making a portfolio like this. Now, exercise 0, if you type in E0 Creo, it'll take you to my video on how to make a portfolio. And so let's look at that right now. So I was saying fun stuff. This is a little bit more fun stuff. So let's go to Applications, go to Render Studio. Now, if you don't have Render Studio, it depends. Those of you who are taking my class at ECC, we have this. So you should have Render Studio. Not everyone gets Render Studio. It depends on what school you're going to. Okay, so Render Studio, it actually takes photorealistic renderings of whatever you're doing. So we have real-time rendering on, turn on perspective, and it slows down your computer. You can actually hear my speakers through my laptop. It's actually roaring. The fan is going because it's utilizing 100% of that microprocessor, even all the cores. Anyhow, so what I want to do is I'm going to turn off real time, and you hear it quiet down. Okay. All right, and it's going to move faster now. Now go to Appearances, right over here, and pick something like, for example, right here, this is one of my favorites, Chrome Plate. Now, before you just select surfaces, that's if you want to select an individual surface. We want the whole thing to be Chrome. So over here is a filter. Click over here where it says All, and find Part. Select the part. See the little paintbrush? Click. And now middle click. Just like when you add a dimension, remember, you hold the wheel down and it will apply it. Now, if you really want to see something neat, and again, you might have to have a professional card to see this. So if you don't see it, don't panic. Shading. Shading with reflections. And look at that. Now it's like really highlighted. Looks pretty slick. Let's go to Appearances. And I'm going to go over here to Red. PTC Red. Now, this is where you could just select individual surfaces. Click on this surface here. Hold Control if you want to select additional surfaces. And I'm going to paint just the chamfers and the hole. Now I release Control and middle click again on the wheel. And you've just added some color. Let's go over here to Scene. Now there's different scenes you can add here, but I'm going to go to Edit Scene. Now I want mine to be on a floor differently, like it's laying down. So go to Environment here and Floor Plane, and I believe we want Back. There we go, select Back. And you can hit Close, and now see the shadows are affected differently. And make sure that perspective view is turned on. And now go ahead and hit Real-Time Render. And sit back and see how well it actually renders. It could be fast on some computers, slower on others. They have a phenomenal rendering package built into this software. And again, you might not have it, depending upon if you have the student license where you actually have classes and your college or university pays for this. You might not have all this functionality, so just be aware. Okay, now if I wanted to make a portfolio for this, here's how to make a portfolio. Now there is a video for this, but I'm going to show you really quick. Now you could use LibreOffice. Notice I have LibreOffice right down here, or I have Microsoft Word. Either one is fine. I'm going to show you. LibreOffice is free. Microsoft Word, you might have to pay for it, but I'm going to use Microsoft Word. But before I do that, I'm going to hold Alt and Print Screen. Now I go to Word, start up Microsoft Word. I got an old version of Word, 2010, but up here I'm going to go ahead and type in capital E1, hit enter, and we're going to put enclosure. I'm going to call it the enclosure. Enter. You can put your name. If you want, put your date. But now, to get it into the document, hold Control and hit V as in Victor, and it will drop it in. Now, you'll see here, and you know what? So it runs faster, turn off real-time render, or also just keep running. Okay. There, now it could go back. Oh, not there. I wanted to go to the Word document. And let me go back to Creo. Got a lot of stuff going here. All right, so there we have the Word document. Now, let's say we want to tidy that up a bit. You could click. You could leave it like that. This is impressive to an employer. Now, remember, the whole idea of a portfolio is to make an impression when you try and get a job doing this. Not many people know Creo, by the way. Creo, like I said, is you're like in the special forces of CAD. It's tough. So make a great portfolio, and you could maybe find a really nice job doing this. All right, so if you go to Format, you'll go to Crop, and you can crop this down. Okay, and just get rid of the stuff around it, and then you can click, and you can drag that out a little bit bigger. Now hit to the lower right, hit Enter, and then Lab 1. Make a space for that, hit Enter a few times, and Lab 1B, because you're going to make your portfolio like this. And then you could save it and send it to me as is. All right, another thing you could do, you could go to File, and there's Print, and you'll see there's, you could go to Print here, and a lot of times, instead of the MS Printer Manager, hit Add Printer Type, and I believe you could usually find, oh no, I'm not finding it. Hit Cancel. I was hoping to get a PDF there, and there's probably a way to do it, but you could do a, let's see here, Quick Print. But you know what, just do it the way I was doing it. Now, here's the thing. If you want to save your model, remember it saves it in a temporary backup place, but I would go to Save As and save a backup. Now what the backup does, it keeps the name E1 because you want that name on it, and it just lets you direct where you'd like to put it. So if I wanted, I could put it on my desktop, under my documents. I'll just go to desktop and hit OK, and boom, it's there. Okay, so now I've saved it. So just be aware, otherwise it saves it in this temporary directory unless you save it like that. So it's a good thing to do. Now, those of you with LibreOffice, if you don't have Microsoft Office and you have LibreOffice, I'm going to just show you really quick. It works the same way. Now, LibreOffice, you could Google it and just download it. It's free. Now, this is LibreOffice Writer, by the way. That's one of the modules in it. Okay, so here I just type in E1, and I'm actually going to put in enclosure. A little bit different than I did before. Hit Enter. You can put in anything else you want. Enter and Control V again, and it should paste that in there. Now when you click here, if you right click, they have crop. And you can do the same thing we just saw where you could just crop down what you don't want to see, and then just move it and click off of it. And you can enlarge it by grabbing the corners. Never do this. This is a blunder that I see people do where they stretch it out. And it looks very unprofessional if you do that. And I've seen portfolios from students where they do that. Never grab the middle ones. Always grab the corners, and it scales it. So that's going to make your portfolio look professional. Okay. All right, so that's LibreOffice. You could use either one of those. And then just save it, send it to me when you're done with it. All right. Now, that's pretty much it for the exercise 1 and the fun. Now there were the labs 1 and 1B. Those are in the training guide. So if we go back to where we had the training guide, let me zoom out here a little bit. Okay, now first of all, how do I rotate this? If you right click, you'll notice there's no rotate. But if you download the training guide right here, and then it should appear like in my Chrome, it's going to drop in here. There it is. I click on it. It'll open it up again. Now look at this. You have a rotate button. So that's helpful when you're making the next two things. So where you're going to find the drawings for these are at the end of the exercise, whatever exercise you're on, you go to the very last page of it, like there it is. And this is, by the way, this is all you're responsible for my classes, is making that model. But I encourage you to enhance it, because that portfolio is going to be like gold if you enhance those images. Okay, now here, this is your first L1 list right there, and then this is L1 or Lab 1B. Okay, so there's and this looks like the letter F. Now to rotate, remember, you could click on this a couple times, or 3 times, and it rotates, so you're not having to turn your head. I've seen students turn their head a lot, and it's like, oh no, just download it and rotate. Okay, so there is that. You can see it's a 2 by 3.5, and I'm going to make this really quick just to show you. Now, remember, those of you, I really encourage you in this case to try these on your own. Pause, and then go back later. If you get stuck, watch my video. Okay, but you're going to be a lot better designer. Okay, so 2 by 3.5. So let's start new part. And this is L1, so capital L1, hit OK. Now, remember, everything's on the front plane for the first 4 weeks here. So select the front plane, go to Sketch, go to the line tool. Now we're going to do something different. Remember, we use rectangles and circles. We haven't really used the line yet. So line chain, go to the origin, your anchor point. Always a good idea to start there. Click, drag up a line, click, and I'll middle click 2 times. And the reason is we want to scale it down because this is a really tiny part. So now find that dimension, double click, set it to 2 and hit enter. Now hit fit, or refit there. And actually I'm going to drag it in. Let's refit it again. All right, so now we have that, and you could use your wheel to fit it in. So we have that 2 inches, looking good there. Let's go back to line. Right over here, click on that point, drag this out a little bit longer, click, drag this up like so, click, drag this across, stay away from the equal symbols. Look at that, see that equal symbol? It highlights the right edge. That's because it wants to make it equal to both. Equal is an excellent automatic relationship, and it can be turned off in those options that I showed you in the very beginning of the class. But I kind of like it. It's very useful. So I leave it on. So click here, drag this up, make sure you don't get an equal. I'm going to go ahead. Actually, I do want it to infer to that edge. See how it's dashed across it? That's an inference line. Click, drag this across, stay away from equals, click, drag this down, not quite as low as the last one. Click, drag this over here, stay away from equal symbols, drag this up here. This one you can make it equal, actually. Click and drag this across to close it. Now middle click. Now we could have gone the other way. I'll be honest, the other way would have been easier. Now let's change this. So we're going to go to dimension and add the first one right here. Click on the actual line. You don't have to click on both ends like I was showing you earlier. You can click on the line. Now up here, hover. Does anyone remember which mouse button you have to select to drop the dimension in? If you pick the middle wheel, you're right, middle click. Okay, now let's go ahead and put our dimension in. That's going to be actually it's 1.75. Hit enter. And let's go back to that drawing. I just want to make sure. Oh, it's actually 1 inch. I made a mistake. 1.75 is over here. Look at how this is what we call baseline dimension. The left edge is the baseline, and every subsequent dimension is based off of it. So we have 1, 1.75, 2.5. So double click, change it to 1. Now let's click on this edge to this edge. Get it up here, and you stair step them so they climb over each other. 1.75, enter. Now the next one, click on this edge to this edge. Stair step them and make that 2.5. And if I'm correct there, I just want to double check. That's 2.5. Now this one doesn't need to be added, 3.5. Well, it needs to be changed actually. I'm sorry. That's middle. Let's go down there. Now we could just double click on this. 3.5. All right, now these dimensions, neither one we really want. So instead, if you look at the drawing, they're actually dimensioned this way. This one, click here, and then middle click over here. That's 0.85, I think. Let's just double check. I have bad memory sometimes. 0.85. And then the next one is 1 inch. So it just steps over. So click here to this bottom edge and then click and then 1 inch. Now, if you ever, like, see these equal symbols? If you ever get those equal symbols and it's interfering, like if you add something that interferes, you could delete those because sometimes you might accidentally add them. But in this case, we've got it working. Lay the dimensions out. Look at how I laid them out. Take the time to lay them out. One reason why by the 6th week we'll learn that these dimensions can be called up for your 2D drawing. And then you don't have to do a lot of work. You just say, retrieve those dimensions, and they propagate onto the drawing how you laid them out here. And if they're laid out in legible, good format like you learned in 101, or else you'll learn in 101 if you haven't taken it yet, that's a good drawing. Okay, hit OK. Now go to extrude, and it's only 0.5. I don't need to rotate it necessarily. I trust it. Hit OK. Now you can rotate, and look at that. It's beautiful. Have a little fun with it. I encourage you. You know, this is all. You get 5 points for this one according to the training guide. If you remember, if you go back there, training guide, I believe is page 8 or something. So you go here. There it is. So L1 is 5. L1B, the next one, is 10 points. All right, but feel free to use rounds and just add them and just have fun. You know, go over here, add a couple rounds wherever you want, and we'll rotate at that bottom edge. Hit OK. Now you could go to try chamfer, have a little fun. 0.125, we could use that one again. See how they work. Notice how they stop when they come to a sharp edge. If there's a fillet, they go all the way around. Okay. Now try shelling if you want. Go to shell, select that face. Look at that. We have it set to 51 thousandths, but we could go to that 0.06, which is more common. Hit enter. And then you could add your colors to it. Remember over here, you could go to Applications, Render Studio, or if you just go to View. If you don't have the Render Studio, you could still use these colors under Appearances. And you can make a glass or whatever here. Like I'm going to go to Part, click on it. And there, now we have a cool looking part there. Great portfolio piece. Okay. All right, that's, and then we take this one. I think that looks pretty good right there. And maybe change the perspective if you want. You don't have to. If you want, you could turn off the spin center. That will turn off where it rotates. It will now rotate off of edges and things instead. If you don't want that in the image. And Alt, print screen. The reason I pick Alt print screen, hold the Alt key down, is if you have dual screens, it only takes the screen that you're working on. So you don't have to trim as much. So over here, I'm going to click down here, Control V. And now we could crop that. So I go to Format, Crop. Okay, so we're looking good. Let's bring that up. Let's get the next one here. The next part will be L1B. Hit OK. I'm going to, just for kicks, I'm going to select the top plane and show you what happens. It's not a big deal. Select the top plane, go to Sketch, and you could go to, remember I told you I was going to show you center rectangle. Love center rectangle. Okay, if anything is symmetric, use the center rectangle. It really works out well. Okay, click, drag it out, middle click. This is supposed to be a lot smaller. Let's take a look what that size was in the book. And it should be right after, there it is. It's on page 25. Lab 1B, we see it's 3 by 5 and it's 1.5 inches thick. So we'll make 3 by 5. Oops. Hit refit and squeeze this down. Let's bring that in a little bit. There is a setting that does it automatically, and I'll try and find that and put it in one of the videos soon, so you don't always have to hit refit. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and draw in some center lines. Now center lines are needed. I'm showing you now what we normally cover in exercise 2. So this is a little preview for you. You don't need to do what I'm about to show you to do this, but we want those 4 holes in each corner. Normally I would say just go ahead and draw them and dimension each one of them off of the edges. It's good practice, and that is good practice. But I'm going to show you a little tidbit of advice here. Something that makes it quicker. Go to center line, select the origin, drag up a vertical center line, and then select the origin, drag a horizontal. And you're probably saying, there's already center lines there. Those are actually reference lines. They're not center lines. So reference lines can't be used for mirroring. You have to actually draw center lines if you want to use the mirror tool, which I'm about to show you. Okay, now go to the circle, and right about here, floating, stay away from that line, draw out a circle, click, make sure it doesn't touch anything. Middle click 2 times. Now drag these dimensions out that you see here, just like we did before. The hole diameter on the print, it says 0.5 and it says TYP. Anyone know what TYP means? It means typical. So for any hole that looks like it, unless it's marked differently, use that dimension. So 0.5, hit enter. And then this one, remember, center the dimensions so they look nice. It's going to be 0.75. Double click on that, 0.75. Now you could go to the dimension tool and add that too. All right, and let's verify that. I just always good to check. Oh, yeah, hole is 0.5 through, 4 places. 4 PLCS means places, so there's 4 of those. And here we see 0.75 and 0.75. And then see that little equal symbol with the center line? That means it's going to be symmetric on the other side, so it matches. All right, so we're good to go here. Let's get that centered there. Now I want to show you how to mirror. Middle click 2 times or hit escape. Now select what you want to mirror. Click on that circle, the outside of it. Now up here you'll see the mirror tool should be available. Click on it and select the center line you want to mirror across. Like in this case, we'll mirror across the vertical center line first. So click on that and you'll see it will mirror across. Now you can't do them both at the same time. You can't do horizontal and vertical simultaneously, as far as I know. But let's go ahead and try this now. Now I'm going to select this circle. Oops, and notice that when I selected it, I dragged it out and made it a little bit bigger. Now you're probably thinking, wasn't that a strong dimension? How'd that do that? Yeah, sometimes that happens, so go ahead and click 0.5 to change it back. Now, if that's a problem for you, if you can't let go of your mouse, like I made a mistake of holding on to it too long, you can always right-click and find a lock. By locking the dimension, it's not going to move it if that ever happens to you, okay? So, anyhow, now you learned about lock, but you don't always have to lock your stuff. That was just a fluke, but it sometimes happens if you hold on to your pointer too long. Okay, so now I'm going to click on that right here. So it highlights green. Hold Control. Don't forget the Control key. Select this one here. And now go to Mirror and select the horizontal center line. Done. Oh, look at that. I messed up that one too. 0.75. Boy, I've never done that before by accident. All right, so now that we have that, we're going to hit OK. And we go to Extrude and set it to 1.5 and hit Enter. Hit the green check. Now select this face, and I'm going to show you something new too. If you know you're going to extrude, select the Extrude tool first. You could do that too. Go to Extrude, and it automatically starts a sketch on the surface, prepping you for what you're going to extrude. Go to Rectangle, and now find the center point, click and drag out, and we went with center rectangle in that one. Sorry, I went a little fast there. Get to this edge and let it snap to that edge, and now middle click 2 times. This is going to be 1.5 for the width. Hit OK, and look at that. It went to extrude automatically, so there's a little fast way to do it. Many CAD systems can do it that way too, but Pro Engineer Creo was originally designed to do it that way. And I'll show you a little difference in a second what it does. All right, so let's flip this because we know it has to cut. And the AI automatically need to remove material. In this case, we got that to work, but it only needs to go 1 inch deep. All right, and look at that. It creates the crevice inside there. Hit OK. Now, why do it the sketch, select sketch first and draw versus extrude first and then let it sketch? Well, look at when we did the first part, it keeps an extra feature, what they call on the feature tree. Now, this is the history of everything you do. And every one of these little features adds a little bit more, or takes a little bit more resources. A very minute amount, mind you. But if you're doing an assembly of over 10,000 to 1,000,000 parts, that increases exponentially if you sketch that way. So it can actually have a performance effect if you're opening up an assembly of 1,000,000 parts that were sketched first and then extruded later. By going with extrude, notice it negates that extra feature there. This extrude integrated it. That one did too, but we don't have that extra sketch feature. So just beware. Creo was originally designed to do it the way we just did it, where we went to extrude first. Rewind if you want to see that again. And then it's sketched on the surface and then integrated it. So performance-wise, for these parts, you won't even notice. We're talking a millisecond of difference, especially with computers that are this modern. But back when I used to use this in 1995, that extra features could actually tack on, not kidding, 5 minutes of time because computers were so slow. Remember, a watch nowadays has more power computing-wise than a computer in those days. All right, so anyhow, we've got that done. Now have a little fun with that. Let's go to round, select the edge here, grab that little thing out, have a little fun. Drag these out, rotate it around, get this edge. Okay, hit OK. Now go to chamfer, click on this edge here, this edge. If you want to make a countersink without using the hole wizard, which we're going to learn in exercise 4, you could put countersinks in this way. See the chamfer. Okay, hit it right. So rotate it around, select the back side, go to shell, select that back surface, specify your wall thickness. We'll go 0.062 and enter. And you can do whatever you like. All right, and now if you want, you could go to view, go to appearances. I'm going to go with, I like the silver, but you could go with whatever you want. And go with part, select the part, and there it is. You could add colors to it, have fun. Make it look professional. Don't make it look too colorful. Sometimes it might not look right, but have fun with it. I encourage you to have a little bit of fun. And remember, go to perspective. Now we'll take that part, Alt, print screen on the keyboard, go to our document here, click underneath L1B, Control V. Now it might go down on the bottom sheet, but that's fine. Go to crop. Oops, I didn't want to scale it. Make sure you grab the crop tool, which is that little L there. Click. See if we could get it up there. Oh, it doesn't fit. Let's squeeze this one down. I'm going to go to Format. I'm going to crop off the shadow a little bit here. There, now we're able to fit it. Get that underneath. And there you are. And that's all what you can do. And if you want to even dress it up more, under Format here, there's frames that you could add. You could put them in circular frames or make them look like there's the photographs. You can have some fun with this, okay? And just remember, they take up a little bit more space, so you might have to squeeze them down a little bit. Now, when you're done with this, you could go to File, Save As, and save it as a Word document. And you could call it Portfolio. Put your name on it, maybe. And you could save it as a PDF too. And that's how I want it. I want them saved as PDF and sent to me. And then I give you your grade. And you'll see it on D2L. All right, so, and you could keep using this document. So what you do after this, you hit Enter, and then you could go to Insert, Page Break, and now start capital E2 for exercise 2. And that's going to be a wheel. And that's what we're going to cover for the next exercise. All right, so that concludes what our plan was to cover today. And email me with any questions you have, those of you who are my students. And that is it.